Welcome to Rush, Arkansas, a place that these days is a ghost town, but 100 years ago was a mining boom town with thousands of residents, dozens of businesses, all because of one mineral that they found in these hills around me. And that mineral is smithsonite. And I am especially excited to be here because I personally have mined and refined smithsonite all the way down into zinc back at Cerro Gordo, the abandoned mining town that I live in. So when I heard that there was a whole area set up because of smithsonite, I had to come see it. And this area didn't boom just because people suddenly wanted more zinc. It boomed because of World War I. We needed more brass, and to make brass you need zinc, so this area became very important for a very long time. So today, we're gonna walk around, see what buildings are left, and then make my way up into the hills to see if we can find some of these mines that really made this place prosper. So this whole area of Rush was set up because of a mistake. There was a farmer in 1880 named James McCabe, and he was wandering around looking at the bluffs, kind of like where I am right now. And he found this really pretty yellow rock, and he was convinced that he had found gold. So he came back, he showed everybody, he goes, "Look, I found gold, I'm about to be rich." He found some partners. They thought, you know, if it's not gold, at least maybe it's the silver ore we had heard about. When really they had found zinc carbonate, smithsonite, and the yellow stuff is sometimes called turkey fat. And so they built a smelter. 6 years later, they had this smelter they spent all this money on. They were excited. They fired it up. They put the rock in, and it produced all of these rainbow flames and smoke in a way that zinc does, as zinc has a lower boiling point than silver does. So they were disappointed. Their pool of silver or gold they expected to be at the bottom was not there. So dejected, they offered to sell the whole thing, the whole claim and the smelter, for a can of sardines that was worth about $2.50. And the prospector they offered it to said no. And that was probably the best thing that ever happened to this area, because it turns out that turkey fat that they had found, that zinc carbonate, was almost 75% zinc. It was some of the highest quality zinc in the United States. And so that's what kind of changed this from a farming area to a booming mining town. And their smelter they set up is still here. So we're going to wander up, check that out, and look around some of the other buildings. So here's the smelter that McCabe and his investors built in 1886, and they fired it up that one time, and they got those rainbow fumes and learned that their silver dreams were done, but a zinc boom was just beginning. And I know those fumes they're talking about. I've refined some zinc, and when you heat it up, it just explodes into this yellow zinc oxide. And zinc oxide, is used these days for all sorts of different things. And zinc back then was primarily used for galvanization, rust proofing stuff, for making the brass and other things. And these days it's used for mostly rust proofing as well as some pharmaceutical stuff. But this thing was only fired one time, so that's why it's in still such good shape. And eventually this area would become the Morning Star mining area. And there's some photos online that I'll show that it just shows a huge complex here with all sorts of buildings and structures and mills. And for me, it's an interesting connection as well, because we have a mine called the Morning Star mine back at Cerro Gordo. That was a huge mine too. So I feel a real kinship to this place. So this is the old blacksmith shop at the Morning Star. This is where they would have put on the new shoes for all the wagons needed to get the ore out of here, because they eventually wouldn't refine the ore here. They built that smelter and realized, no, we need to ship it away. But I love the patina of the wood, an old wood like this. But this is where a lot of action would have happened. Again, I would like to imagine what it would have been like when it was actually humming. You know, the clank of iron, steel, and progress. And behind it, you can see more pads of the old town of Morningstar, some concrete pads, bolts still in them. This was a lot of hopes and dreams here. And so this is where all the action would have happened back in the day at the Morningstar. This is the mill where they were doing up to 200 tons of the smithsonite processing per day. You know, places like this in mining camps, this is running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's really nice to come to places like this and enjoy the peace and quiet. You know, look around and just feel like this. Back in the day, these towns would have been just chaos. Everything going 24 hours a day, just trying to process as much ore as possible. And here they weren't smelting the zinc on site. They did that one time in the smelter that we just saw, but here they were just sorting it, processing it, so crushing it down, getting to the size they want, separating out the zinc from the other stuff that they didn't want. And the town really boomed. You know, by 1916, this place had close to 5,000 residents living up here, which is hard to believe. There was a telephone service, there was a bakery, there was hotels, there was a hardware store, a blacksmith, pharmacies, restaurants, barbers, all sorts of stuff. All being supported by the main mines in the area, one of which was this, the Morningstar. And as you can see, I got my pack on now because I want to find the mine itself. There's a piece of ore that they pulled out of the mine at the Morningstar that won a gold medal at the World's Fair that we'll talk about. But I did a lot of research last night on where I think it is, so we're gonna take a little hike and see if we can find kind of what kicked off this entire area. Then go check out some more buildings, some other stuff, but my favorite part of all these towns is the mines, and so let's go see if we can find some. When I'm out west looking for old mines in the desert, it's easier because there's no trees and you can see the tailings pile. But out here you got the trees where even in the winter with no leaves, you can't see those signs from that far away of maybe where they were poking around back in the day. So this would have been it. This is what started it all. This is part of the Morningstar mine here in Rush. It has different mineralization than I've seen at Cerro Gordo, even with smithsonite. This is more ledges. So you can see how a piece of the turkey factor just fall out of the ledge. I think I would find it, think he found gold. But right here is what really put Rush on the map, not just because it was the biggest find, but because in 1893 they found a single chunk of smithsonite, zinc carbonate, that weighed 12,750 pounds. And they called it jumbo. And imagine just getting it out of here. We're way back here. And to get that out of here, they put it on a wagon, they put some oxen on it, and they dragged it to the river, they rafted it, and they brought it all the way to Chicago. And in Chicago, they put it in the World Exposition. And that's the same fair that they had the Ferris wheel and the Cracker Jack, and the Jumbo won gold medal for the purest zinc ever exhibited. And that really just put Rush on the map. You know, it's the way that a lot of these mining towns work. One big rush, one big find, everybody thinks they're going to find the next big one and their lives are going to change, so they came rushing out to these hills. That brought all sorts of investors, and so by 1902 there was like 17 different mines here all over the place, all going after the zinc carbonate that was right down in that hillside. So I'm on a road trip right now going across America, checking out the different mining towns and the ghost towns that they leave behind. And I'm going on a lot of backcountry roads, going hiking a lot of places, and something that's been a real big game changer for me has been this app called Onyx Off-Road. It is an offline navigation app that's just amazing. You're able to use it to map your route ahead of time. You can save your map offline, so you don't have to worry about if you have cell phone service or not. It'll show you if you're going to have cell phone service. They have coverage maps. They show trails in the area that you can take your car on that are really fun to do. There's trail reviews, photos of the last time anyone was there, reports whether the trail is closed or not. And it's just been amazing for me. I use it to map out everything, including the mines I was hoping to find today. And if you're out there and you want to give it a shot, they're giving 20% off your first year membership. All you have to do is use the code BRENT or scan this code on the screen at checkout. Again, Onyx Off-Road. It's been amazing. I use it all the time, both here and back at Cerro Gordo. So I hope you guys check it out. So after the jumbo news, a lot of people flocked here. You started seeing houses like this springing up. But the real boom didn't happen until 1914. And it was because of the war that was happening 4,000 miles away. And when World War I broke out in Europe, Germany was the leading zinc producer, and zinc was needed. You know, they needed it for casings, they needed it for bullets, artillery shells, military equipment, and Germany cut off all the supplies to allies, and so the price of zinc just exploded. It went from $14 a ton to $160 a ton pretty much overnight. And so Rush right here became one of the most important places in America, and this is kind of the neighborhood that sprung up. I remember after the big mining boom town, Rush declined eventually by the 1950s, and so the area started advertising this as a ghost town, like a place to visit. And they ran that out for a while. As you walk down, you see just the different people. This building was lived in by the school keeper down here. It's called the Brantley House. And it's kind of what makes it feel human. You know, it's not just an unknown structure. This is where the teacher lived, you know. It wasn't just a mining camp. This place had kids, schools, lessons, grading papers by candlelight sitting right in there. They all got a little bit of history still clinging to them. And this was the heartbeat of Rush back in the late 1800s. This was the general store. I think it was called the Taylor Medley General Store. And this wasn't just a place to get supplies, it was the center of town. You know, this is where people got their mail, it's where they gossiped about the town, things happening. This is where they heard about the next big strike. It's kind of what stitched the whole town together back in the day. And these days, you can see someone's been doing some restoration work, which is good to keep it standing at least. I also read that in the general store was not just the innkeeper, he was the justice of peace, meaning that people get married right here. This was their big day. Well, you know what they say, in a gold rush, sell pickaxes, and that's kind of why this wall exists. This is, at one point in time, the Hicks property here in Rush. This was set up by a guy named Lee Hicks, who came here in 1903 with his wife Alice, and while everyone was digging in the hills up there for zinc, he decided that he was going to open a general store and a hotel, and then rent some cabins and do all of that. And this is the site of the only stone structure here in Rush. This was a 2-story inn with hand-laid stone. And the Hicks family, because of that, became the richest family here in Rush. There's actually this really cool digitalization of what the property would have looked like back in the day. I'll try to put that up on the screen if I can't. If not, I'll link it down below. But this was it. This is where they were renting horses, mules, selling things, renting rooms. But the Hicks stuck around for a long time. They were here from 1909. And Lee himself, he died in 1920, just as the boom was ending. But his wife and the children stayed. And then we watched the zinc price collapse. Great Depressions hit. Eventually they would die, and I believe they're still in the cemetery here. The real death blow for Rush was the end of the World War. 1918 rolls around, the demand for zinc just plummets. They don't need the casings, they don't need the brass. Imported zinc becomes way cheaper to use anyways. And Rush was kind of on its final legs, and there were some miners here still picking through the Morning Star, taking what they could. And the company came back and invested a lot in another smelter, hoping that zinc would be needed for rockets, and that didn't really work. And so in the 1950s, the post office closed down. Everybody had pretty much left. And in the 1970s, it was a ghost town and trying to be marketed as such for people to come and visit and look around. So I've heard some rumors of some really cool mines around here. That's what I'm on the hunt for now. They're not on any main map. Just have to go by clues, but hopefully we can find something cool. Kind of cap off a little bit of adventure along with this history. So that's another sign. You got a old piece of mining equipment there. Maybe we're getting somewhere. I see some stacked stones. Wow. Here's a great example of a mine. Look at cribbing. Looks like recently though, it's collapsed. Right there. Could go up and over. Let's check it out. Oh! We might be in luck. Very cool. So this gives you a better idea of how they were mining here. Big stope, so they would have found a vein and just chased it as far as they could. No support, no timbering. Try to find the vein that they're chasing to give you an idea of what the smithsonite looks like. I imagine it's that green banding you see there that's in the dirt. That looks more like talc almost or something to me. But you can see right there. Might have been the ore they're chasing after, might have been sphalerite or something else. But a lot different than the mines out west. I think we should get back down to the river, talk about that and the fate of Rush. So that's Rush, from a gold medal winning rock to a family that refused to leave to miners who died getting the zinc out here. And I think it's a good example of what happens when the world needs something you have and what happens when the world doesn't need it anymore. During World War I, this Rush Valley that I'm in right here was responsible for 5% of the zinc in the United States. In a small way, this patch of land helped win a world war. And then these days it's mostly forgotten. The mines are collapsing, the buildings are falling down. But if you look close enough, the stories are still there. And that's why I've really enjoyed going on this road trip to visit other ghost towns, just to dig up those old stories and understand just the world around me a little better. And I appreciate you guys following along on this one. I hope if you liked it, you subscribe. There's going to be a lot more ghost towns and stories to come. But until then, I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you next time.